Hello everybody, and welcome back to another Sinister Saturday. Welcome if you're new here and just decided to tune in with me and maybe check out my channel. It's not like others and it's not like most true crime videos or true crime channels, but I'm just starting out and I'm trying my best, and I just hope that I pull some of you guys in. Also, if you can't tell or if it's not noticeable, I got a new camera and I got a microphone, so you should be able to hear me a lot better now. Also see me a lot better now, which my phone camera wasn't too horrible, but it wasn't the best. Anyways, how are you doing today? I hope you're having a wonderful day so far. Today's story is one of those cases that gives you trust issues with everyone wearing a stethoscope. It's about a doctor who didn't just fail at the do no harm part. He kind of said, what if I do all the harm instead? And not only did he get away with it for decades, but people literally loved him for it. Probably not for it, but people literally loved him. I mean, the man's patients baked him cookies. He was that guy. The kind of doctor the grandmas would rave about while he was literally killing grandpas left and right. Yeah, it's wild. Today we're talking about Harold Shipman. You've probably heard the nickname before, Dr. Death, and no, not the American one. This was the British original, and honestly, he makes every other angle of death case look like amateur hour. Harold Shipman is considered one of the most prolific serial killers in modern history. He killed over 200 people. Some estimates say closer to 300. Like, how does someone even have time for that many murders between tea breaks? It's baffling. So grab a snack, maybe not a doctor's appointment, and let's get into it. Harold Frederick Shipman was born January 14th, 1946 in Nottingham, England. Yeah, the same Nottingham from Robin Hood. You know, stealing from the rich, giving to the poor, green tights, all that. But this story isn't about stealing from the rich or giving to the poor. It's about taking everything, literally life itself, and giving nothing back. Harold grew up in a totally average middle-class British family. His dad was a truck driver and his mom stayed home. And they were just kind of normal. No obvious red flags, no haunting childhood trauma, at least not on paper. But every villain needs an origin story, And his probably started when he was 17. His mom Vera got really sick, lung cancer, incurable. And she suffered a lot, and Harold, being her favorite child, spent a lot of time watching her fade away. Her doctor would visit the house and give her morphine injections and ease the pain. Those strong painkillers to make you relax, kind of float away from the pain. Yeah, Harold watched that. Watched how a needle could take someone from suffering to peaceful in seconds. And that image, well, it never left him. Some people say that he was fascinated by it. Others say something darker clicked in that moment. Like he realized that medicine wasn't just about healing, it was about control. You can decide who suffers and who doesn't, who lives and who doesn't. I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist, but if that doesn't mess with a 17-year-old's head, I don't know what will. After his mom, Vera, died, Harold decided to become a doctor, surprisingly. Maybe it was to help people, or maybe it was to chase the same feeling that he saw when the morphine silenced pain. Either way, at 19, he enrolled in Leeds University Medical School. There, he met this girl named Primrose Oxtoby. Yeah, I know, her name sounds like a Victorian perfume. Primrose Oxtoby, for when you want to smell like someone who gardens elegantly. Anyways, they met on the bus, hit it off, and then she got pregnant not too long after. It was the 60s, so obviously they got married. He had to. That's just what she did. They had a daughter, Sarah, then a son, Christopher. He was still in medical school, studying hard, trying to look like he had it all together. There are photos of him smiling with his kids, looking like your average happy dad. Except, serial killer. He graduated in 1970, and honestly, everything looked picture perfect. The world saw a young family, a promising doctor, and future full of good things. But we know better. After graduation, Harold started working at Pontefract General Infirmary. Sounds fancy, right? Except soon after he started, people noticed something weird. Patients just kept dying. Like, sure, hospitals see death, But a lot of these deaths seem to happen on nights when Harold was working. That's when you start raising eyebrows. Still, nobody wanted to believe that the friendly new doctor with a calm bedside manner might be the problem. Nurses liked him, he was helpful, smart, always around, and senior doctors loved how ambitious he was. He volunteered for everything, stayed late, filled in when others couldn't. He seemed like the dream employee, but not everybody was buying it. A few colleagues quietly said that he came off arrogant, a little too confident for someone fresh out of med school. He had that know-it-all attitude that rubbed people the wrong way, but he was good at what he did, or at least he looked like he was. So everyone ignored their gut. Bad idea, bad choice, bad decision. And this is where the double life starts to take shape. During his time in the hospital, Harold was introduced to a drug called pethidine. That's basically Demerol, a super strong painkiller that they use at childbirth. And it's here that he developed what I like to call the doctor's version of a party trick. He started injecting himself. Yep, the man got hooked. He became addicted to that floaty, euphoric high, one syringe at a time. But here's the thing. Shipman's fascination with narcotics wasn't about escaping reality. It was about mastering it. He wasn't just chasing the high. He was experimenting with the power drugs gave him. He'd seen what morphine did to his mother, how it soothed, silenced, and controlled. It's like he found his favorite toy and wanted to see what else it could do. He pushed boundaries, even on patients who were already close to death, just to test the limits. It was like he was conducting secret experiments on people who trusted him. According to later investigations, it's believed he caused dozens of deaths during his early years in the hospital, though proving that has been complicated. Still, the pattern was there. Quiet patients, convenient timing, and a doctor who was always right there when life slipped away. By the time Harold became fully certified, he left hospital work to become a junior partner at a small town practice in Todmorden. And fun fact, or creepy fact, Todmorden literally translates to something like Death Valley or Murder Town. I'm not even joking. It's like fate was waving a red flag saying, hey, maybe not this guy, but of course everyone ignored it. In 1974, most British doctors were moving away from house calls. It just wasn't efficient anymore. But Harold prided himself on being old-fashioned. He made personal visits, checked in on the elderly, showed up unannounced just to see how his patients were doing, and he acted like he cared. People loved that. Especially the older ladies. He'd sit in their living rooms, drink tea, compliment their antiques. Oh, what a lovely vase, Miss Johnson. Is that your grandmother's? And they'd beam like he was their favorite grandson. He was charming, attentive, safe, except he wasn't. Almost all of his patients were older women who lived alone and they trusted him completely. He'd visit them even when they didn't ask him to. He'd check on their health and help them feel comfortable, and sometimes he'd help them die. But no one suspected anything because it was Harold, the sweet neighborhood doctor. And while he was out making friends and collecting cookies, he was also restocking the practice's narcotics cabinet and disposing of expired meds. Except he wasn't disposing of them, he was stealing them. He kept building his secret stash of drugs, all while everyone thought he was being helpful and responsible. Such a good cover story. Oh, don't worry, I'll handle the drugs. Yeah, he handled them all right. By this point, he was fully addicted, secretly experimenting, and killing in small doses. Pun intended. No one saw it because he wore the mask of professionalism so well. Patients adored him, colleagues respected him, and the system wasn't even looking. It was all paperwork and polite assumptions. It's almost funny in a tragic, terrifying way. Everyone wants a doctor who cares, right? Someone who knows your name, shows up at your house, remembers your birthday. But in Harold Shipman's case, that kind of attention came with a price. A deadly one. And that's where we'll leave it for now. Our perfect, quote-unquote, doctor with his perfect smile, his tea time chats, and his growing stash of poison. Because the next thing starts unraveling fast. The lies, the drugs, the addiction. It's all about to catch up with him. And spoiler alert, the system's about to fail spectacularly. Okay, so last time we left off, our boy Harold was living a double life. Family man, town favorite, secretly raiding the drug cabinet like it was an all-you-can-sniff buffet. And honestly, it was only a matter of time before the walls started closing in. Because here's the thing about addictions. They don't stay quiet forever. You You can only play the responsible doctor for so long before someone starts wondering why the morphine levels are dropping faster than your credibility. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. So it's now the mid-1970s, and Harold's in Todd Morden making his rounds, smiling his polite doctor smile, and popping by little old ladies' houses with his clipboard and some morphine. Everyone in town adored him, patients, nurses, even the other doctors at the practice. They thought he was a saint for doing all the tasks no one else wanted to do. Need someone to clean out your drug cabinet? Harold's your man. Need expired narcotics properly disposed of? Don't worry, Dr. Shipman's on it. And oh, the irony. Behind closed doors though, he was drowning in his addiction. He'd inject himself with Demerol, sometimes multiple times a day. This man wasn't just stealing for fun, he was feeding a full-blown habit. People later said he acted off sometimes, moody or spaced out, but back then, who was going to question a doctor? Like, excuse me, sir, are you high? No one does that to a guy writing prescriptions. Eventually, though, his coworkers started to notice that the numbers didn't add up. Literally. The practice's narcotics records were a mess. Missing vials, mismatched doses, random shortages. At first, people brushed it off as sloppy paperwork, but after a while, the math just wasn't mathing. By September 1975, the problem was too big to ignore. The doctors at the practice confronted Harold, basically saying, "Hey bro, where's all the Demerol going?" And for once, Harold didn't even try to lie. He admitted it. He said, yep, it was him. He'd been taking the drugs, and he couldn't stop, and he knew he had a problem. That's the part that kills me, no pun intended. Like, imagine your coworkers just casually saying, yeah, sorry, I've been stealing morphine from work and injecting it into my veins. My bad. And then everyone just nods, because what do you even say to that? So they reported him, like they legally had to, and the police got involved. Harold was arrested and charged with drug offense. But here's where things start getting so frustrating. Instead of treating him like a criminal, the system treated him like a troubled professional. His lawyers recommended that he go to rehab before the court date because that always looks better to the judge. Like, see, Your Honor, he knows he messed up and he's fixing it. He was sent to a rehab facility called the Retreat, which, like, could they have picked a more peaceful sounding name for a man knee-deep in deception? The Retreat. Sounds like a spa weekend, not a court-ordered detox. Anyways, he stayed there for about 90 days. Police would come check on him occasionally and make sure that he was cooperating, blah, blah, blah. When he was finished with rehab, he seemed fine. Cleaned up, clear-eyed, and he wrote a long statement admitting everything. Again, just the drug stuff, not the killing. He said he'd been addicted for about 18 months, taking up to 700 milligrams of Demerol a day. For context, that's a lot. Like, how are you still breathing him out? He told authorities that he planned to stay away from the general practice. He wouldn't take any jobs that give him access to our narcotics. He'd stay under psychiatric supervision, you know, the whole redemption arc, and the system believed him. When he finally went to court, he pled guilty to 8 drug charges and 1 count of forging a prescription. You'd think he'd get a serious sentence, right? Nope. He got a fine, about 600 pounds at the time, which is roughly $5,000 today. That's it. No jail time, no permanent mark on his medical record that would stop him from practicing again. Because here's where the real fatage begins. The General Medical Council, basically the British version of the Medical Licensing Board, had to decide whether he could still be a doctor. I don't know about you, but if my doctor got caught forging prescriptions and mainlining narcotics, I'd like him to not come back to work. Seems reasonable, right? Apparently not to the GMC. They didn't even bother to consult the narcotics detectives or pull a full background. They didn't look into his pattern of coincidental patient death. They just kind of shrugged. He went to rehab, he learned his lesson, let's give him another shot. I don't know who was asleep at the wheel, but they basically handed him his medical license back. No restrictions, no supervision, nothing. And he walked out of court and went straight back into profession. Like, immediately. And I swear, this moment right here is the reason hundreds of people died later. The system had a chance to stop him, He'd literally been caught lying, stealing, forging prescriptions, and injecting himself with the same stuff he'd later used to kill people. And instead of locking him out, they gave him a clean slate. Like, you got this, champ. Don't do drugs. Honestly, it kind of makes my blood boil because this wasn't just a bad call. It was a catastrophic negligence. So Harold moves again, this time to Hyde, a little town near Manchester. He joins the Donnybrook Medical Group, which sounds like a cheerful place for a man named after death, right? He starts working again as a general practitioner, and surprise, people loved him. Once again, he's the reliable, charming doctor who makes house calls when others don't. He's got this old-fashioned doctor persona nailed down. Mornings at the office, afternoon making rounds to people's houses, evenings dropping in just to check on lonely patients, and they adored him for it. Especially elderly women. He reminded them of the good old days when doctors made time for you. He'd sit down, drink tea, listen to your stories, compliment your antique clock, and he made them feel seen. But underneath that charm, he was a shark in a cardigan. Harold started doing exactly what he always done, collecting morphine, keeping his private stash, and helping people die. But this time, he was smarter about it. He was no longer just feeding his addiction, he was feeding his ego. He started falsifying death certificates to make every death look natural. Old age, heart failure, whatever sounded reasonable. And since he was the doctor signing off, nobody questioned it. If a doctor says natural causes, that's it. There's no autopsy. And guess what Harold loved to recommend after every death? Cremation. Because once the body turns into ash, no one's checking for morphine. It's like he created the perfect murder system. He had access to drugs, he had the authority to sign off on deaths, and he had a community that trusted him completely. And he exploited every single part of it. For years, nobody saw it. Or if they did, they didn't want to believe it. A few people who thought, that's weird, all of his patients keep dying, got brushed off. Because questioning a doctor, especially a nice doctor, is uncomfortable. It feels rude, and Harold knew that. He relied on it. So he kept doing what he did best, showing up unannounced, acting like everyone's GP, killing quietly, and blending right back into small-town life. The craziest part, he stayed at Donnybrook for 14 years. 14 years! By the time he finally left, he had already killed at least 71 patients that we knew of. Later investigations added another 30 suspicious deaths. And those are just the ones that they could prove. The actual number might be double or triple that. And here's the kicker. During all those years, he was never investigated, never suspended, never even questioned seriously. Because his reputation was that good. It's like if Ted Bundy had a stethoscope and glowing Yelp reviews. So yeah, the system failed spectacularly. He had already been caught once, proven dangerous, and yet he was allowed to keep practicing medicine like nothing happened. It's infuriating, honestly. But as much as he tried to cover his tracks, some cracks were starting to show. And eventually, people did start whispering. A few funeral directors, a couple of doctors, and people who were actually paying attention noticed something strange about Harold's patients. They were dying way more often than anyone else's. And that, my friends, is where the unraveling really begins. Because when you play God long enough, someone eventually notices the bodies piling up at your feet. Alright friends, buckle up, because this is where things go from weird doctor with a drug problem to holy crap, this man is a full-blown serial killer. It's like the kind that somehow had an entire town wrapped around his finger while he was basically playing the Grim Reaper in a lab coat. So by the time Harold Shipman settled into Hyde, he was clean. At least on paper. Fresh start, new town, new job, same deadly habits. He joined the Donnybrook Medical Group as a general practitioner, which sounds like a cute little suburban clinic where someone might prescribe antibiotics for a cough, not the epicenter for a mass murder spree. But hey, hindsight, right? Now here's where the charm kicks in again. Harold prided himself on being old-fashioned. You know, the kind of doctor who still made house calls, sat with patients over tea, and never rushed you. He'd say things like, I believe in taking time with people, and everyone loved him for it. He wasn't just their doctor, he was practically family. And he leaned hard on that. He dropped by unannounced just to check on patients, especially the elderly women who lived alone. He'd ask how they were feeling, chat about the weather, maybe compliment their china or their curtains. Because apparently even serial killers appreciate a nice floral print, and they adored him. He was polite. well-spoken, attentive, like who wouldn't trust that? But here's the horrifying truth. Those same visits were often their last. Harold would come by, give what was called a pain relief injection, and within hours, sometimes minutes, the patient was gone. And then he'd come back later, pretend to discover them dead, and tell the family that it was of natural causes. He'd sign the death certificate himself because, again, he was the doctor. No one questioned it. And when you sign heart failure or old age as the cause, guess what? No autopsy. But he didn't stop there. He always pushed for cremation because nobody means no evidence, and it worked. It's honestly kind of sick how perfect his setup was. He had the drugs, the access, the authority, and he was literally the person families turned to for comfort, and he was the reason they needed comforting in the first place. Most of his patients were elderly women living alone. They were vulnerable, lonely, and grateful for attention. He'd charm them, make them laugh, maybe bring up their memories, and it was the perfect camouflage. To the outside world, he was just being a good guy, and I think that's what makes this story so disturbing. It wasn't blood and chaos and hiding bodies in basements. It was clean, polite, signed-off murder. Over time, people started to notice a pattern, not of murder, but of dependence. His patients were obsessed with him. If another doctor came to see them, they'd refuse. No, I want Mr. Shipman. He had that grip on them. It's like he trained them to think he was the only person who truly cared, which honestly gives major cult leader energy. Now, while all this was happening, Harold was also collecting drugs again, because of course he was. Every time a patient died, he'd dispose of their leftover medications, especially morphine. He'd tell families, "Don't worry, I'll handle this for you." And they'd thank him for it. The man literally cleaned up his own crime scenes while being thanked for his kindness. His kindness. I mean, talk about evil efficiency. By this point, he wasn't even pretending to need the drugs for himself anymore. He had a full-blown stockpile, and he used it like a painter uses color. Different doses for different deaths. Most were morphine and diamorphine, which is basically pharmaceutical heroin. He killed people who were terminal, yes, but also people who were totally fine, like I have a cold fine. There's this one story that really gets me. An older man called Harold for a house visit because he had a mild cold. A cold. Harold went over, did his friendly doctor thing, and not after long, the guy was dead. Same with the woman who had postnasal drip. You know, like the sniffles. She was gone hours after his visit. Another woman complained of an upset stomach. Dead the same day. Heart attack, he wrote, natural causes, and everyone believed him. He was so smooth about it too. If anyone ever questioned him, even slightly, he'd use the medical jargon and tone it down, like, oh, these things just happen at her age, and who's going to argue with a guy in a white coat who uses words like cardiac event? No one. There was even a weird seasonal thing happening with his murders. Later investigations found that a lot of his deaths clustered around Christmas, like every year. Right around the holidays. His numbers spiked, which, I don't know, maybe he was extra stressed about buying presents or something, but it's just eerie. He'd ruin Christmas for entire families every year, like clockwork. Imagine losing your grandmother on Christmas Eve and never knowing she was murdered. And the scariest part, nobody caught on. Not really. I mean, there were whispers, sure. Some nurses noticed that an unusual number of his patients were dying. A funeral director even raised an eyebrow at how many bodies came through with Shipman's signature on their paperwork. But again, he was Dr. Shipman, the nice guy, the town treasure. No one wanted to believe it. You know how small towns are. Everyone knows everyone, and gossip spreads fast. But suspicion, that's uncomfortable. It's easier to brush off weird coincidences than to accept that your beloved doctor might be a killer. So, the whispers died down, the deaths continued, and Harold just kept going, year after year. Meanwhile, at home, his wife, Primrose, stood by him. Through the addiction, the arrest, the rehab, all of it. She never left. And when everything finally came crashing down years later, she'd still be sitting front row in court, defending him. Which makes you wonder, right? Did she know? Was she in denial? Or was he just that good at compartmentalizing? There's almost nothing on record about their marriage. It's like their home life wasn't visible. But if he was anything at home like he was in public, calm, controlled, in charge, It's not hard to imagine how he kept everyone fooled. He lived two perfectly balanced lives, the doting family man and the serial killer in Scrubs. And it's weird, but you start to wonder why. Why did he do it? What was he getting out of it? He wasn't torturing people or stealing from them, not usually, or getting revenge. He didn't even get any real financial gain from it until the very end. It's like he just wanted to decide who lived and who didn't. Like some messed up God complex mixed with addiction to power. And that's the thing that really gets under your skin. He could have stopped. After rehab, after getting caught, he had the chance to clean up and have a normal life. But he didn't. Instead, he doubled down. The man learned absolutely nothing except how to get better at not getting caught. Eventually, though, small cracks start showing in his perfect facade. Funeral director noticed that way too many of Shipman's patients were dying. A local doctor who often had to countersign his cremation forms started feeling uneasy. Like, why are all these deaths old women from the same doctor? She brought it up to the authorities. And guess what the police did? Practically nothing. They looked into it for like a month, and then they dropped it due to lack of evidence. They didn't even check his criminal record or call the medical board, because if they had, they would have seen his previous drug conviction and known something was seriously off. But nope, they just filed it away and moved on. That's right, the police literally had Harold Shipman and most prolific serial killers in British history in their sights, and they waved him on through like, have a nice day, doctor. He went right back to killing. By now, the death count was in the hundreds, and not one official investigation had stopped him. Think about that. For more than 20 years, he operated freely, killing person after person, signing the paperwork, smiling, drinking tea, and walking away. And I know this sounds crazy, but people in town actually had a nickname for him, Dr. Death. Like, they'd say it jokingly because, haha, everyone who sees Dr. Shipman dies. But they didn't mean it. It was like a small town humor. Imagine laughing about that only to find out it was horrifyingly true. Eventually though, fate or karma or just plain human curiosity caught up to him, because when you kill that many people, you're bound to mess up eventually. And when he did, it wasn't fancy forensics or DNA that caught him. It was something way simpler, paperwork, and a daughter who refused to believe her mother just died of old age. Okay friends, go grab a snack, some water, and maybe, just maybe, cancel your next doctor's appointment. Because this part of the story is where everything finally blows up. After more than 20 years of killing people under the radar, Dr. Harold Shipman finally meets his match. And it isn't the detectives, or forensics genius, or even the police. No, it's a daughter who paid attention. So it's 1998, Harold still in Hyde, still working as a GP, still adored by his mostly elderly female patients, and still doing his same old house call, tea, murder, paperwork, cremation routine. Like, he's so confident at this point, it's almost cartoonish. He thinks he's untouchable. The police had already looked into him once and he shrugged. The medical board ignored his past drug conviction. Nobody questioned him because, again, he was Dr. Shipman. But then along came Kathleen Grundy. Kathleen was 81 years old, but you wouldn't know it if you looked at her. She was the former mayor of Hyde, super sharp, super active, and she walked 5 miles almost every day. Volunteered, did her housework, had a busy social life. Basically, she was living proof that age is just a number. She wasn't sick, she wasn't frail, she was thriving. And of course, Harold took an interest in her. He told Kathleen that he was conducting a research study on aging, like how older people maintain good health. Very noble sounding, right? He said she'd be a great candidate because she was such a fine example of healthy aging. She thought that was flattering. Who wouldn't? He even had her sign a document after the study. 2 of his other patients were brought in as witnesses, just to make it look official. Totally normal, right? Except it wasn't a research form. It was a will, a fake one. Now remember, Harold wasn't dumb. He'd been doing this for a long time. But this was sloppy, because he used his own typewriter to type it up. And in the will, Kathleen supposedly left everything. Her estate worth over 350,000 pounds, which is like over $1 million US today, to, wait for it, Dr. Harold Shipman. Not her daughter, not her grandchildren, her doctor. Like, Harold, my guy, that's not subtle. So Harold visits Kathleen at home on June 24th, 1998, supposedly taking a blood sample for the study. That afternoon, her friends find her dead on her sofa. Just gone. He shows up again later, calm as ever, and says that she must have died of old age. Signs the death certificate himself, because of course he does. And as usual, suggests cremation. But here's where he slipped. Kathleen's family didn't go for it. Her daughter, Angela Woodruff, said that her mother had always been very clear that she had always wanted to be buried, not cremated. So they had her buried. No ashes, no evidence destroyed. And that, my friends, is what saved this entire case. Because a few weeks later, Angela gets a call from her mother's solicitor, that's British for lawyer, saying, hey, we have your mom's new will, and you might want to sit down. The will left everything to Harold Shipman, and it was typed, not handwritten, like every other document Kathleen has ever made. Angela immediately knew it was fake. She literally said my mother didn't even own a typewriter. So she goes to the police and says something's not right. She tells them about her mother's sudden death, the weird will, and the push for cremation. All of it. And for once, the police actually listened. They opened the investigation and Kathleen's body was exhumed. Now I know that's grim, but thank God they did. Because when they ran the toxicology test, guess what they found? A lethal dose of morphine. Straight up diamorphine. The same drug that Harold had been obsessed with since his mom's illness. The same one he'd used on countless other victims. Boom, they finally had proof. Police immediately raided Harold's practices, and oh boy, it was like opening Pandora's pillbox. They found medical records that he had clearly altered, like literally written new dates and conditions to make deaths look natural. They found his private stash of morphine in insane amounts, enough to kill hundreds of people, and they found all the little paper trails that he thought would keep him safe. It was like he'd been saving trophies without even realizing it. At this point, they charged him with 15 counts of murder, plus forgery for the will. But they suspected way more. They just had to start somewhere. But if you're wondering how Harold handled being arrested, oh, he was annoyed. Like, not scared, not remorseful, just irritated. He acted like this whole thing was a huge inconvenience, like the police were interrupting his schedule. There's actual footage of his police interviews on YouTube, if you want to see it. The detectives are showing him pictures of the victims, asking, did you kill this woman? Did you administer morphine to her? And Harold just yawns. Like, he literally yawns. No emotion, no denial, just silence. Like he's bored. I watched the footage and wanted to scream at the screen. Like, sir, you killed hundreds of people. Maybe act a little less inconvenience? Anyways, they go through his records and realize that Kathleen Grundy was just the tip of the iceberg. Over the years, his patients' death rates were 10 times higher than any other doctor in the area. 10 times. Like, how does that not raise red flags sooner? When the case finally went to trial in 1999, it was a media circus. The charming, mild-mannered doctor turned mass murderer. It was unthinkable. The courtroom was packed, reporters from all over Europe came to cover it, and there in the front row, like some tragic painting, sat his wife, Primrose, and all 4 of their children, loyal to the end. She apparently refused to believe that he did it. Even when the evidence was overwhelming, she stayed by his side, which I don't even know how to process. Like, was she brainwashed, in denial, or was she just protecting her family name? Harold himself sat there like a statue, completely expressionless. During testimony, witnesses would cry, family members would describe their losses, and he'd just take notes, page after page of scribbles. Never flinched, never spoke, never apologized. It was like he'd built a wall between himself and reality. Prosecution, on the other hand, came prepared. They brought in experts and explained how morphine metabolizes, how his patient records were falsified, and how the death patterns lined up. They showed the fake will. They even matched the typewriter he used to the one in his office. After all that, the jury didn't take long. On January 31st of 2000, Harold Shipman was found guilty on all counts, 15 murders and 1 forgery. He was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. And you'd think after everything that would finally be the end, but of course it wasn't. Because Harold, being Harold, wasn't about to let anyone else have the last word. He stayed in prison for 4 years, refusing to speak about his crimes. No interviews, no confessions, nothing. The man who'd control hundreds of lives refused to give any closure. And then, on January 13, 2004, one day before his 58th birthday, he hanged himself in his cell. Now, here's the most Harold thing ever. He timed it so that his wife Primrose would get his full pension benefits. Like, he planned his suicide around the financial payout. Even in death, it was all about control. So yeah, after all those years of murder, manipulation, and medical malpractice, Harold Shipman ended his own life on his terms, just like he ended everyone else's. But even though he was gone, the damage caused was far from over, because once investigators dug deeper, the real scope, what he'd done, finally came to light. And it was worse than anyone could have imagined. Hundreds of deaths, decades of deception, and a healthcare system that had enabled him at every turn. And that's what we're going to be diving into. This is where we talk about the aftermath, the investigations, and the questions that still haunts everyone who's ever heard this story. Why? Alright friends, so we've made it to the end of this wild, awful ride. Grab your snacks, take a deep breath, like I just did, and maybe even pet your dog for emotional support. Because this part is about the fallout. The shockwaves that rolled through England once people realized that the nice neighborhood doctor with a polite smile had murdered hundreds of people right under everyone's noses. So when Harold Shipman died, January 13, 2004, remember, a lot of people were furious. Like, of course he'd find a way to die on his terms. The families of his victims never got answers, never got closure, never got to ask him why. And he took that power with him, even in death. He was still in control. Now, his suicide didn't end the investigation. Far from it. If anything, it made people more determined to figure out what the hell had just happened. Because once the police started combing through everything, the medical records, the death certificates, the morphine logs, the cremation forms, it became clear that Harold hadn't killed a few dozen people. Oh no, we're talking hundreds. The official inquiry that followed was called the Shipman's Inquiry, led by Dame Janet Smith, an absolute queen by the way, and the woman who basically said, alright, we're going to dig through every inch of this mess. And oh boy, was it a mess. They went through over 270,000 pages of documents, testimonies from nurses, colleagues, patients, families, pharmacists, thousands of statements, 4 years of work. And what they found was horrifying. In the end, they confirmed that Harold Shipman had murdered at least 218 people. 218. That was the confirmed number, as in proven with evidence. But experts believe the real number could be anywhere between 250 and 300. Let that sink in for a second. 300 people. And these weren't just random crimes in dark alleys or victims who went missing without a trace. These were everyday people in their homes in broad daylight, surrounded by family and friends who had no reason to suspect a thing. Because how could they? Their doctor told them it was of natural causes. He'd been killing people since the 1970s, across 2 medical practices, through multiple decades, under multiple bosses, and no one stopped him. And if you're wondering how that was even possible, buckle up, because this part is almost as infuriating as the murders themselves. The inquiry found so many points where someone should have stopped him. Like, remember when he was caught stealing Demerol and giving prescriptions back in the 70s? That should have ended his medical career forever. But the General Medical Council didn't revoke his license. They didn't even warn future employers about his record. He walked right back into medicine like nothing happened. Then, over years, he killed dozens more people, and the pattern was right there in plain sight. A funeral director literally told the police, hey, this one doctor's patients are dying way more often than anyone else's. A nearby GP said, something's off with all these cremation forms, and the police? They looked into it for a month and then closed the case. No one checked his history. No one connected the dots. It's like every safety net failed all at once. The Shipman's inquiry tore those systems apart piece by piece. They found that medical oversight was way too trusting, death certificates were signed without review, and cremations were approved without question. And controlled drugs? way too easy for doctors to access and dispose of. Basically, Shipman had found the perfect loophole and no one had the systems in place to catch him. So after all this came out, the UK government was like, okay, we need to fix this immediately. New regulations were introduced to make sure no doctors would ever have that kind of unchecked power again. They changed how death certificates were. Now 2 doctors had to sign off before the cremation can be approved, and they tightened drug control laws and started tracking prescriptions more closely. They even created a national system to monitor death rates by doctor. So if another GP suddenly starts racking up funerals like frequent flyer miles, someone's going to notice. So yeah, the system finally learned, but at an unimaginable cost. And while all that was happening on paper, the emotional damage was so much deeper. The community of Hyde was absolutely shattered. This wasn't some distant evil, this was their doctor, their friend, the man who delivered babies, wrote prescriptions, made small talk at the grocery store. People couldn't process it. Imagine finding out that the person you trusted most, the one who literally held your parents' lives in his hand, had been quietly killing them. It destroyed that trust. People stopped going to the doctor. Some older patients reportedly refused home visits altogether because they were terrified. I see why. They didn't want anyone coming into their house with a stethoscope ever again. And then there were the families of his victims. Many of them had cremated their loved ones years before because that's what Harold suggested. There were no remains to test, no evidence left, just suspicions and death certificates that now meant nothing. For those who still had buried their relatives, the police had to exhume their bodies. More than a dozen at first, then dozens more. They'd test them for morphine, confirm what had happened, and then rebury them. Imagine that trauma, having to dig up your mother, grandmother, your husband, because your doctor might have murdered them. It's unbearable. Some families sued for compensation, others campaigned for medical reform. A few just wanted his name wiped off of every record possible. The rage and grief ran deep, and still does, even now. But the one question that nobody ever got a clear answer to, not the inquiry, not the psychologist, not anyone, was why. Why did Harold Shipman do it? He never confessed, never wrote a letter, never offered an explanation, not a hint of remorse. And that silence left everyone guessing. Was he addicted to killing? Maybe. He certainly had the control thing down. Some think he had a god complex, deciding who should live and who should die. Others say he convinced himself that he was helping, that by ending lives quickly, he was sparing people pain. But that doesn't line up because many of his victims weren't even sick. And then there's a theory that goes back to his mother, that watching her die from cancer, watching morphine take away her pain, left something twisted in his brain. Maybe the moment shaped his idea of mercy, or maybe it made him obsessed with control. We'll never know, because he took the truth with him. He never once spoke to the press or gave an interview, and then he hanged himself. The note he left behind, there wasn't one. Just silence. It's kind of poetic in a horrible way. The man who took so many voices away by ending their lives decided that we didn't deserve his either. After everything, the final tally was staggering. At least 218 confirmed murders, possibly up to 300. That makes Harold Shipman the most prolific serial killer in modern recorded history. And all of it happened under the cover of medicine. The one profession literally built on trust. So yeah, it's a lot. Even now, people in Hyde still talk about him in hushed tones. Some joke darkly about it because what else can you do? Others just shake their heads. One reporter said the thing that haunted them most was how casually people used to call him Dr. Death before it all came out. It was a town joke, like, oh, you're seeing Shipman? Good luck. But when that truth finally surfaced, that joke turned into a nightmare. And that's the moral of the story, I guess. Evil doesn't always show up in the way you expect. Sometimes it wears a white coat, carries a clipboard, and remembers your birthday. So yeah, that's the story of Harold Shipman, who was also known as Dr. Death, the doctor who betrayed an entire country's faith in medicine. And if there's one thing I've learned from this story, it's this: question everything. Ask for second opinions, read every form before you sign it, and if your doctor insists on cremation, maybe, just maybe, get a different doctor. Anyways, thanks for hanging out with me today, friends. Go drink some water, call your grandma, and be kind to good doctors out there, because thankfully, most of them are still doing the right thing. And remember, if something feels off, it probably is. Anyways, Have a great day, evening, or night. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.